The year is 9 AD. Deep in the forests of Germania, 3 Roman legions are marching through fog and mud. 15,000 soldiers. 3 eagles, years of discipline and training. And then the trees erupt. Germanic warriors pour out of the forest from every direction. No battle line, no formal army, just a storm of spears and screaming men. The legions are surrounded, trapped, slaughtered. Within hours, 15,000 Romans lie dead in the mud. When Emperor Augustus receives the news in Rome, he smashes his head against the palace wall in grief and rage. His voice echoes through the marble halls. Quintili vere legiones rede. Verus, give me back my legions.
Caesar, the legions are lost. No!
Now, here's the thing about the Roman Empire. Rome had been defeated before, but Rome always came back for revenge. Always. That's what made Rome Rome. Crushed rebellions, erased cities, absorbed entire peoples. So when word of the Teutoburg massacre reached Rome, everyone expected the same thing. Revenge. But something strange happened next. Rome did nothing. No legions marched back into Germania. No punitive expeditions. No retaliation. Nothing. The most powerful military machine the ancient world had ever built, the force that conquered Greece, Egypt, Gaul, and the entire Mediterranean, simply stopped. And that creates a puzzle that historians still argue over today. Why didn't Rome conquer Germania? Why did the empire that never stopped expanding suddenly decide, enough? This isn't a question about the Teutoburg massacre alone. The battle was a disaster, but Rome had survived worse. This is a question about the entire history of the Roman Empire at its peak. Because the truth is, Rome didn't stop because it couldn't conquer. It stopped because at some point, maybe without even realizing it, the empire changed. To understand what happened, we have to understand what Rome was at its height. The year is 117 AD. Emperor Trajan sits on the throne. From his palace on Palatine Hill, Rome looks like it owns the world, because it almost does. The empire stretches from the hills of Scotland to the deserts of Mesopotamia, from the Rhine River to the Nile. 60 million people live under Roman law. 400,000 soldiers guard the borders. Roads, bridges, fortresses, so well built that some are still standing today. But let's get closer. Let's put ourselves in the sandals of a Roman soldier on one of those borders. His name is Marcus. At least that's what the army calls him. But Marcus wasn't born in Rome. He was born in Gaul. His father was a Gallic chieftain. He joined the legions to earn citizenship, to get land, to build a future for his family. And he's not alone. Half his unit is made up of soldiers from the provinces: Gauls, Germans, Syrians, North Africans. The line between Roman and barbarian has already blurred, and that blurring would change everything. But before we get to that, we need to talk about something else. Let's talk about money. In the early days of Rome's rise, conquest paid for itself. Every new province brought silver, gold, grain, and slaves flowing back to Rome. The plunder funded the next campaign before the last one had even finished paying out. It was a machine that ran on plunder. And for centuries it worked. But by the 2nd century AD, something had changed. Most of the wealthy, easily governed territory within reach had already been absorbed. What remained were the harder, poorer lands, the cold, dense forests of Germania, the sparse deserts of Arabia, the wet, barren highlands of Scotland. The Roman historian Tacitus described Germania as a place of hideous forests and foul swamps. To Roman eyes, there was nothing worth the cost of taking it, and the cost was enormous. Let's go back to Marcus, standing on his frontier fort. Every mile the Empire pushes further north means more soldiers to pay, more forts to build, more roads to maintain, more food to supply. A single legion needed 600 tons of grain per month. By the time Marcus reached the frontier, each soldier cost Rome more than 3 times what they'd cost in Caesar's day. The math had simply stopped working, but even that wasn't the whole story. There's a popular idea that Rome went soft, too civilized, too comfortable, too decadent to finish off the barbarians at its borders. The archaeological and historical record tells a different story. The Celtic and Germanic tribes Rome fought weren't disorganized savages. They were skilled fighters who refused to play by Roman rules. The legions wanted an open field and a formal battle line. The tribes gave them ambushes in dense forest, raids that vanished before a response could form. Terrain they knew better than any scout, the same terrain that had swallowed 3 legions at Teutoburg. But the tribes weren't the only reason Rome stopped. Something else was shifting, something inside the empire itself. By 117 AD, Rome had reached its largest extent. And when Emperor Hadrian took power, he made a decision that would define the rest of Roman history. He stopped pushing outward. Instead of conquest, he ordered walls built. Hadrian's Wall across Britain, fortifications along the Rhine and Danube, defensive lines through North Africa. Now think about what a wall really is. A wall isn't just a defense, it's an admission. Somewhere behind that stonework, someone made a decision. This far, and no farther. But why?
Sire, the Danube line is broken. The tribes are aligning in the north.
Why would the most powerful empire in the world stop expanding? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Rome couldn't afford to keep going. The empire had grown too large for any single political system to hold together. Every new territory brought more people to govern, more borders to defend, more cultures to absorb. And the people they were absorbing were changing the very definition of what it meant to be Roman. By the middle of the 2nd century, the legions were filled with soldiers from the frontier provinces. Men like Marcus, whose loyalty often ran to their commanders first and to Rome second.
Where are the supplies? We cannot fight on empty stomachs.
And that created a new problem. If the army was no longer fully Roman, what was holding the empire together? The answer, not much. Once expansion stopped, the cracks that Conquest had been plastering over started to show. By the 3rd century AD, Rome was lurching from crisis to crisis. Frontiers were under constant pressure. Currency was losing value. Emperors rose and fell with alarming speed. In the 50 years between 235 and 284 AD, 26 different men held the title. Most of them died violently. Historians call this the crisis of the 3rd century. Yeah, and it exposed something terrifying. Rome had grown too large for its own system. But even that wasn't the whole picture. Underneath all of it, forces far beyond Rome's control were quietly working against it. The climate was shifting, a stretch of cooler, wetter weather that cut into agricultural yields across the empire. Disease swept through the population in repeated waves. And beyond the borders, groups fleeing the Huns in Central Asia pushed westward, turning Rome's frontiers into a corridor of migration rather than a solid line. And the army meant to hold that line? It was now largely made up of Germanic soldiers like Marcus.
Men, hold the line! Watch the river!
We obey!
Men whose loyalty often ran to their own commanders first. None of this looked catastrophic on its own, but together, it was corrosive. Here's the part that tends to surprise people. Rome wasn't ultimately destroyed by an outside invasion. It was hollowed out from within, long before the final blow ever landed. Step back far enough, and a pattern emerges. Not just in Rome, but across history. Empires that expand too far, too fast, often collapse under their own weight. Rome's decision to stop may have bought it centuries it wouldn't otherwise have had. But that survival came at a cost. The empire that had once defined itself by conquest slowly became defensive. Bureaucratic, turned inward.
To the walls! To the walls! There are too many of them!
When the final crisis arrived in the 5th century, Rome no longer had the will or the resources to meet it the way it once would have. The Rhine was crossed by invading groups in 406 AD. 4 years later, Rome itself was sacked. The barbarians didn't just knock. They found the door already weakened from the inside. So why did Rome stop conquering the world? Not because it was beaten in the field, not because it went soft. Rome stopped because, piece by piece, the empire itself changed. The economics of conquest turned against it. The identity of Roman blurred at its edges, and the machine that had built an empire slowly rebuilt itself into something that could only defend one. Think about what happens when any system grows faster than it can sustain. Modern historians studying the rise and fall of powers, from empires to corporations, still point to this pattern. Growth that outpaces what a system can sustain tends to hollow that system out long before any external threat arrives. Rome's story isn't really a tragedy, it's a warning. Marcus's story is the story of Rome itself. He began as a Gaul, became a Roman soldier, and by the end of his life realized he was fighting for an empire that no longer knew what it was fighting for. Rome didn't just stop expanding, it changed into something that couldn't expand. What do you think? Was Rome's decision to stop its salvation, or the beginning of its end? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of history.